It is not large. You could hold it in one hand. The cuneiform pressed into its surface is more than 4,000 years old. Older than the pyramids. Older than the wheel as we know it. For most of the last century, it sat in a drawer, labeled simply administrative, fragmentary, a receipt, a grain tally, nothing worth a second look. But the man who finally read all of it did not call it a receipt, he called it a map. And before he could publish what he believed it showed, his notes were sealed, his funding was cut, and the tablet was quietly moved to a collection that does not allow photographs. Because the map does not show a city on the surface of the earth. It shows a city beneath it. A city the Sumerians said was not built by men. And at the center of that map, marked with a sign the scribes used for nothing else, there is a gate. A gate they did not build to keep people out. They built it to keep something in. This is the story of that tablet, what it actually says, and the year the scribes warned the gate would fail. And I promise you, by the end, you will understand why they buried it instead of breaking it. Let's go beneath the floor of the oldest world. To understand the tablet, you have to understand who the Sumerians were and why we should take them seriously when they describe something we would call impossible. The Sumerians did not think of themselves as the first people. That alone should stop you. Almost every culture invents itself as the beginning of the story. The Sumerians did the opposite. Their own records describe a civilization that arrived already knowing how to build, how to farm, how to track the movement of planets across the sky, with a precision we did not match again until the 17th century. They wrote that this knowledge was given to them, handed down, from those who came before and from those who came from above. They kept lists, obsessive, careful lists, kings, harvests, floods, offerings, and in the middle of those dry administrative records, again and again, they mentioned places that should not exist. The Abzu, the deep waters beneath the ground where a god was said to dwell. The Kur, the land under the land, reached not by dying, but by descending. The Akur, the house of the mountain, a structure they described as having foundations that went down farther than any well had ever been dug. For a long time, scholars treated these as poetry, metaphors for death, for the unknown, for the fear of the dark. That is the safe reading. That is the reading that lets everyone go home at night. But the tablet in that Iraqi basement is not poetry. It is a survey. It uses the same measuring units the Sumerians used to lay out irrigation canals and temple walls. It gives distances. It gives depths. It gives directions relative to the bend of a river that we can still find on a satellite image today. You do not write a metaphor in cubits and degrees. You write a metaphor in praise and lament. This was written in numbers. Cold, deliberate numbers, and the numbers point straight down. Consider how strange that is on its own. The Sumerians invented the survey. They were the first people we know of to divide a circle into 360 degrees, the first to lay out a field with rope and reed and write down its area to the fraction. When they measured something, they were not dreaming. They were doing the most rational thing their civilization knew how to do. So when that same exact toolkit, the cubit, the degree, the depth count, is turned downward into the earth, we are not looking at a priest's vision. We are looking at an engineer's report. And the engineer is reporting on a structure he insists is there. The first scholar to take those numbers seriously was working in the 1960s, copying tablets that had been excavated decades earlier and never fully read. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands, more than any human lifetime could translate. He was supposed to be cataloging grain accounts. Instead, he found a tablet that kept using a single word he could not fit into any account. The word was a name, and next to the name, every time, was the sign the scribes pressed when they meant the great ones. The ones who were larger, the ones who came down. We translate that word clumsily as the watchers, or the fallen, or, in the oldest layer simply, the giants. Now I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the point where most people stop listening, and exactly the point the people who hid this tablet are counting on. The moment you say the word giants, a part of your mind closes a door. You picture a fairy tale. You picture a children's story with a beanstalk. That reaction is not an accident. It is the most effective way ever invented to make a civilization forget something. Turn it into a bedtime story and no adult will ever look at it again. So set the fairy tale aside and look at what the Sumerians actually wrote. They did not describe giants as monsters. They described them as a people with cities, with rulers, with a language. A people who, the tablets say, lived on the earth before the flood, and who were not destroyed by it the way the rest were. The tablets say they went down. That when the waters came, the great ones did not drown. They descended into the city already prepared beneath the ground, and they sealed the way behind them, and the tablet in the basement is the map of where they went. Let me tell you what the map shows, because the layout is the part that changed the translator's life, and the part that should change how you think about the ground under your feet. The surface of the map is organized around a single point. The Sumerians marked it with the sign for the deep, the Abzu. But here the sign is doubled. Something scribes almost never did. A doubled sign meant intensity, the greatest, the deepest of the deep. From that point, lines radiate outward, like the spokes of a wheel, and along each line are markings the translator first thought were just distance counts. They were not just distances, they were levels. The city, according to the tablet, is not a single chamber. It is built in descending rings, each one deeper than the last, each one larger than the last. The Sumerians wrote that as you go down, the city does not narrow the way a mine narrows, it widens. The deepest ring is described with a number so large that the first translator assumed he had made an error in the arithmetic. He checked it 11 times. The number was not an error. The tablet is describing a space far below the surface of Mesopotamia that is wider than the city of Uruk was on the surface, wider than the largest city in the ancient world, underground, sealed, and according to the scribes, not empty. Hold that image for a moment, because it is the opposite of everything our instinct tells us about going underground. When you imagine digging down, you imagine things getting tighter, narrower, the walls closing in, but the tablet describes the reverse, a throat at the top that opens into something vast below. The scribes had a phrase for it that the translator rendered as the mouth that swallows wide, a narrow mouth, a wide belly, as if the entire structure was designed so that nothing inside could climb back up through the throat without passing, one at a time, through the gate at the top. At the very center, at the doubled sign of the deepest deep, the tablet places the gate. And this is where the language stops being a survey and starts being a warning. The scribes described the gate with 3 signs, used together only on this tablet and on 2 fragments found near it. The first sign means the seal. The second means the 7, and we will come back to the 7 because the 7 are the reason any of this matters. The third sign is the one that made the translator stop sleeping. The third sign means until, not forever, not eternal. The Sumerians had words for forever, and they used them constantly, on monuments, on curses, on the names of their gods. They did not use them here. Here they wrote until, the seal of the 7 until. Until what? The tablet answers, and the answer is a date. Before we go to the date, you need to understand the 7, because the 7 are the thread that ties this single tablet to a dozen others scattered across the world's museums. And the moment you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Throughout Sumerian and later Babylonian writing, there is a recurring group. 7 of something. 7 judges of the underworld. 7 gates that the goddess Inanna had to pass through on her descent, surrendering something of herself at each one until she arrived in the land below, stripped of everything. 7 sages, the Apkallu, who the Sumerians said came up out of the water at the dawn of civilization to teach mankind, and who, in the oldest versions of the story, were later sent back down and sealed beneath the earth for sharing too much. I want to stay on Inanna's descent for a moment, because most people have heard it as a love story or a death story and have never been told what it actually maps. Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, decides to go down into the great below. She does not die to get there. She descends deliberately, the same word the tablet uses for the great ones. And to reach the bottom she must pass 7 gates. At each gate, a keeper demands she give up something, a crown, a measuring rod, a robe, until at the 7th and lowest she stands with nothing. Read it as poetry, and it is beautiful. Read it next to the tablet, and it is a description of a security system. 7 checkpoints. Each one strips an intruder of power before they can go deeper. The deepest gate admits only the powerless. That is not how you write a myth about grief. That is how you describe the way into a prison that was built, so that even a goddess could not walk straight to the bottom. And the Apkallu are the other half, the 7 sages. The Sumerians said they came from the Abzu, the same deep, wearing the bodies of fish, bringing writing and law, and the design of cities. For a while they were honored as the founders of knowledge, but the older texts say something happened. The sages taught too much. They handed mankind things mankind was not meant to hold, and so the 7 sages were sent back down, into the deep they came from, and the way was closed behind them. The teachers became the sealed. The givers of knowledge became the thing locked beneath the gate. 7 seals. 7 gates. 7 keepers. The number repeats with a consistency that is not how myth usually behaves. Myths drift, numbers change in the retelling, numbers change in, but the 7 hold, across centuries, across languages, across the collapse of one empire, into the next. When a detail refuses to drift for 2,000 years, it is usually because it is not being invented. It is being remembered. The tablet ties the 7 to the gate directly. It says the great ones who descended did not seal themselves in alone. It says the way down was closed. And then it was bound by 7. 7 seals, set in order, each one deeper than the last, each one corresponding to one of the descending rings of the city, and the tablet says something that the translator circled in his notes and underlined twice. It says the seals were set to weaken in sequence, one by one, from the bottom up. Think about what that means. The scribes were not describing a door that was simply locked. A lock either holds or it breaks. They were describing something more like a countdown, a series of barriers, each designed to fail after a measured span of time, the deepest first, the surface last. As if whoever built it knew the seal could not hold forever, and chose instead to make the failure slow, to buy time, to give warning, and the tablet records how much time. It gives the span between the setting of the seals and the failure of the last one. It gives it in the Sumerian counting of years, the great cycles they used to measure the reigns of kings who they claimed lived for thousands of years each. When you convert that span, carefully, accounting for the way the Sumerians counted, it does not land in the distant past. It does not land in some safely buried mythological age. It lands now, in our century, within a window that, depending on which baseline you use for the flood the tablet references, has either just begun or is about to. That is the sentence that ended a career. That is why the notes were sealed. Now the honest part, because this channel does not pretend. There is no second tablet that says the world ends on a Tuesday. The date is a span, and spans have error bars. The flood the Sumerians used as their 0 point is itself debated. A reasonable person can look at this and say, the math is soft, the baseline is uncertain. The translation of until could carry a meaning we have lost. All of that is fair. I am not here to tell you the ground is going to open next spring. I'm here to tell you something that should unsettle you more, because it is not a prediction. It is a pattern, because the tablet is not alone. Let me show you the others, and let me show you why their agreement is the real mystery, the one that does not go away no matter how skeptical you are. In the British collection there is a fragment, broken on 3 sides, that describes a structure beneath the earth with descending levels that widen as they go down. It was catalogued separately by a different scholar in a different decade, with no knowledge of the Iraqi tablet. It uses the same architectural language. Rings, levels that widen, a center that is sealed. In a private collection that surfaced in the 1990s, photographed once before it vanished back into the market. There is a tablet that lists the 7 seals by order and assigns to each a keeper. The names of the keepers match, sign for sign, the names of the Apkallu, the 7 sages who were sent back down. A tablet no scholar had connected to the others, naming the same 7 in the same order, guarding the same descent. And in the oldest layer of all, in the Sumerian king list itself, the document that names the rulers who governed before and after the Great Flood, there is a strange seam. Before the flood, the kings reigned for tens of thousands of years each. After the flood, the numbers collapsed to something human. Scholars have always treated the pre-flood numbers as exaggeration, as propaganda, and maybe they are. But notice what the king list is actually claiming. It is claiming that something changed at the flood, that a different kind of being ruled before and a humankind ruled after. The king list draws a line across history and says, on that side, the great ones. On this side, us. And the flood is the line. The tablet in the basement tells you where the great ones went when they crossed that line. Not into the sky, not into nothing. Down, into the city that widens as it descends. Behind the seal of the 7, until, here is what I find impossible to walk away from. Any one of these could be dismissed. A mistranslation, a scribe's flourish, a pattern the human mind invents because we are built to see faces in the dark. I would dismiss any one of them on its own. But they were written by different people, in different cities, across centuries, and never compared until our lifetime. And they agree. They agree on the architecture. They agree on the 7. They agree on the descent. They agree that it was sealed, and that the seal was not meant to be permanent. When independent witnesses who never met tell the same impossible story, you are left with only 2 explanations. Either there was a single source they were all copying, some original account so authoritative that no scribe dared change it across 2,000 years. Or they were all describing something that was actually there. Both of those explanations are terrifying. Pick the one you can sleep with. So let me take you back to the gate, because we have not yet asked the most important question, and the tablet, in its last legible lines, tries to answer it. Why seal it at all, if the great ones went down willingly, if they descended into a city prepared for them? Why bind the way behind them with 7 seals set to fail in sequence? You do not lock a door from the inside with a timer unless you are afraid of 2 things at once. You are afraid of someone coming in, and you are afraid of yourself, or something with you, getting out. The tablet's final passage is damaged. Whole sections are gone, flaked away by 4,000 years. But the signs that remain are enough to make the meaning clear, and they are the reason the translator stopped working on it and asked to be reassigned. The passage says the seal was set not by the great ones but against them. It says the 7 were placed by those who came from above, the same ones the Sumerians said gave them knowledge, the same ones the king list places before the flood. It says the great ones who descended were not hiding. They were confined. The city that widens as it goes down was not a refuge. It was a prison, and the gate at the center was never meant to open. The until was not a promise of return. It was an admission of failure. The builders knew the seals would not hold forever. They knew that one day the deepest seal would weaken, and then the next, and then the next, rising toward the surface across the span of years the tablet records. And they left the map, and the count, not as an invitation, but as a warning to whoever was still here when the count ran out. Read this, the tablet says, in the only words we can still make out. Read this, and know the order in which the seals will fail. Know which ring fails first. Know how long you have between the first sign and the last. And then the tablet breaks, the final number, the one that would tell us exactly where in the sequence we stand right now, is on the missing corner. The corner that was, according to the translator's sealed notes, intact when the tablet was first catalogued in the 1950s, and missing by the time it was moved to the collection that does not allow photographs. I want to leave you with the part that the skeptics and the believers both tend to skip, because it is the part that is actually true, no matter what you think happened beneath Mesopotamia. The Sumerians believed this, fully, not as a story they told children, but as a fact they recorded in the same careful hand they used for grain and gold. They believed that beneath the ground there was a city, and in that city something was sealed, and that the seal had a clock on it. They organized temples around the idea. They oriented their holiest structures, the ziggurats, as artificial mountains, the Akur, the house of the mountain, raised toward the sky precisely because the thing they feared was below. Everything they built upward was an answer to something they believed was buried downward. Look at the ziggurat again with that in mind. We have always described it as a stairway to heaven, a mountain raised so priests could climb closer to the gods. But a stairway runs both directions, and the tablet suggests the ziggurat was not only a way up, it was a marker, a seal of stone and brick set on the surface directly above the throat of the descent. The same way you would pile stones over a grave you did not want disturbed. The Sumerians built their largest, heaviest, most sacred structures, and they planted them on top, as if the weight itself were part of the lock, as if every brick was a prayer that said, "Stay down." A civilization does not build its entire sacred architecture as a reply to a fairy tale. They were answering something. They were standing on top of something they did not want to wake, and they built toward the heavens to remind themselves which way was up and which way they must never dig. We dug anyway. We have dug deeper into the earth than any Sumerian ever imagined possible. We have bored through layers they could only describe in myth. And every so often, in the records of deep drilling and deep mining, there are accounts that never make the news. Cavities where there should be solid rock. Spaces that register on instruments, and then are quietly reclassified. Boreholes abandoned without explanation at depths that, by strange coincidence, match the descending levels the tablet describes. There is a particular kind of report that surfaces and then disappears. A drilling crew hits a void. Not a pocket of gas. Not a flooded chamber, a void. An open space where the bit drops and the cable runs slack. They lower a microphone the way crews do to listen for water. And the recording that comes back is the one that gets classified. And the crew gets reassigned. And the hole gets capped and marked on no public map. I cannot tell you those reports are real. I can tell you they keep being told by people who do not know the tablet exists, and that the depths they describe keep landing in the same band the scribes wrote down 4,000 years ago. And here is the detail that the translator's sealed notes return to again and again. The tablet does not describe the seals as identical. Each of the 7 is named, and each is given a different weight, a different depth, and a different word for what it holds back. The deepest seal, the first to fail, carries the heaviest of those words. The translator rendered it, with great hesitation, as the one that does not sleep. Above it, the 6th seal holds back what he translated as the multitude, a word the Sumerians used for an army, for a host, for too many to count. The seals nearer the surface hold lighter things, and their words are almost gentle, as if the builders had sorted whatever they buried by danger, and put the worst of it, the deepest, down, behind the seal that the countdown reaches first. Read in order from the bottom up. The 7 names are not a list of locks. They are a list of what comes through them, in the order it is freed, and the first name on that list is the one the scribes would not write in full, leaving instead a blank where the sign should be, and beside the blank a single mark of warning. I am not telling you what is down there. I am telling you that the oldest careful record keepers in human history left a map, and a warning, and a count. I am telling you that the count, as best we can read it, points at us. And I am telling you that the corner with the final number went missing from a government collection sometime in the last 70 years, and no one will say where it is. The Sumerians wrote one more line before the break. It is the only line on the tablet written not as a record, but as a command. The same command, the translator noted, that appears on the 2 related fragments, as if the scribes who never met had each been told to end with the same words. It says, "Do not seek the gate. build upward, and remember the order of the seven. They remembered for 4,000 years. Then, we forgot in less than 1 century. And the seals, if the tablet is right, do not care whether we remember or not. They were set to fail on a schedule, from the bottom up, and the only thing the map ever offered us was the chance to know how much time was left. If you want to know which of the 7 seals the tablets say fails first, and what the Sumerians wrote would rise through it, that is the next descent, and it goes deeper than this one. Subscribe, and we will open the next ring together. Because the thing about a countdown is simple. It does not stop when you look away. It only stops when it reaches the end.